go back and hear what she called Lionel Shriver. Let's hear her answer to the question.
Well, immigration in the modern era, in the the woke era, has always been in the mix, and I guess it first of all, it does connect with race. It connects with income inequality, another left-wing cause. It is about disadvantaged and therefore arguably victimized groups. It has to do with the whole idea of the white majority, the European majority, versus minorities, and of course the minorities are sacred, and the that makes the white people the profane. I mean, it hits all of their favorite subjects, and in combining them in one issue, it's the lightning rod. This is the third rail. This is what's going to make them more hysterical than any other subject.
And yeah, so it's the sacred cow. It's combined everything. It's the chimera of all of these important issues for them. What do progressives get wrong about migration? What do they? Listeners now will understand quite clearly that you're a conservative, not least because you've expressed it explicitly. But what do they not get about immigration? Why are they wrong to make this? To think what they do, assuming that they are wrong?
I think they reject the whole concept of the nation state, and yet they don't take responsibility for that. Right? They don't actually come out and say, we don't want to have countries. Because I don't think that you can have a country without a border, particularly in a world that many other people want in. I mean, you can probably have a country without a border if a lot of you people want out, but not if a lot of people want in. That therefore your country becomes fundamentally meaningless. It's just, and it certainly becomes culturally meaningless because it's just a way station. You're just a place. It reduces country to geography, and conventionally, we think countries are more than geography. So I think that this is definitely connected. This pro-immigration is also connected to professed self-hatred in the West. Although I question that. That is, I think that may the self-hatred they're promoting, they exempt themselves from.
What does that mean?
In other words, if you hate yourself, you hate yourself. But these people hate other people in
the name of hating themselves.
In the name of so it's supposedly this hair shirtery that we have this terrible history. We had slavery. We murdered the Indians in the U.S. So we have no moral claim to this land. But apropos of the Billie Eilish quote, they're not giving their houses away.
Right.
Very good point. So they're putting on this act that they hate themselves, and the rest of us should get on board and hate ourselves. But they don't actually hate themselves because they're not destroying their own lives. They're not forfeiting their own homes. They're not giving away or having to sell their own cars in order to be able to donate even more money or have even more tax taken away from them to cover the cost of these degenerate immigrants who have a much lower IQ than our average here in the West, because they're not as advanced as us due to their own culture and decision making of their own forebearers. So I think that might be a syndrome or something, you know. Let's hear what she's got to say.
Right. And so it doesn't really apply to them. And I don't think that their emotional experience of promoting hatred of their own people and their own country is one of genuine self-hatred. They love themselves. They're very proud of themselves. It's a kind of vanity. So to call that self-hatred is wrong. It is actually a loathing for your fellow countrymen who don't agree with you.
Yeah, it's false humility.
Yes, it's a complete. It is a performance. You know, it is acting out. It is acting out guilt rather than feeling it.
And at that, in comes some splendid StreamYard effects. Where is it? Listen. There. Wasn't it all worth it? Now, back to it.
So why would they loathe their fellow countrymen?
Because they don't have these pure moral values, and they don't go through the theatrics of caring more about people who are disadvantaged than they do about themselves and their own group. I think the whole thing is emotionally very convoluted, because all this talk of shame, these people don't act as if they're experiencing shame. The emotions they exude, if you look at these ICE protests, if we're going to be contemporary about it, do you see them like,
yeah,
sorry, I feel so terrible. Please don't look at me. You get any of that? No, actually, if you feel shame, you stay home.
Yeah.
Right?
If you feel contrition, you stay quiet.
You stay home.
Yeah.
You basically going to crawl under the bed.
Yeah.
You do not want to be seen, and you hide. That's what real guilt feels like. We're constantly talking about white guilt, and I think it's complete rubbish. These people do not feel guilty in the slightest. They do not really think that they are responsible for slavery. They know they didn't kill any Indians, you know, and they think that if everyone were like them, then the whole country would be righteous. They are big show-offs. And so this is just like wearing a t-shirt. It is not real guilt. Real guilt. There's a line in this book, when you're really feeling guilty for something, you want to crawl down a sewer manhole and pull the lid over your head.
Yeah.
So that's not when I look at the ICE protests, they're angry, but a certain quality of anger, right? A righteous anger. Righteous anger. This is vanity. This is more showing off. And the funny thing is, I mean, you say they're risking their lives. They're not consciously risking their lives. They're just fucking idiots, right? Because these are middle class, upper middle class people. They don't usually have run-ins with the police. For the most part, these are white people. So they're not really afraid of the police. They don't take them seriously. They don't take the fact that they're interfering with law enforcement, with officers who are armed, and that is dangerous and probably dumb. So I think they have a sense of entitlement and therefore of imperviousness. Like,
now this, before she goes on, this sense of entitlement is what I believe has come from this whole women's rights movement, which I perceive to be entirely sexist, because it's against the man. It's not involving the man. It's in opposition of the man. And it's all about wanting to be more powerful than him, wanting to conquer him, not work with him, right? Which human rights compared to women's rights does permit. Women's rights doesn't permit a place for the man. And we don't have man's rights. We have human rights, which is for everyone. So when you've given, whether it's women, whether it's trans rights, for example, whether it's gay rights and all the rest of it, right? When you're given a certain group of people, whether it's all women, all gay, or all lesbian, all trans, whatever, right? You're given that certain group, that certain category, if you like, pigeonholes, I can't stand them. You're given that certain group some rights that you're not given the rest. That's inequality. That is tyranny, because you're excluding all the rest, and it's creating that two-tier system. Now, when you've got loads of two-tier systems all over the place, right, you've got a broken down community. You've got an unequal. Inequality is what it's brought in, right? Whereas when you've got human rights, that covers everyone. There is no exclusion in everyone, right? Look up the definition of everyone. It doesn't say all but. No, it says all. ALL, right? Everyone. There's no exclusion in that. So when you've got, going back to what she's saying, this Lionel Shriver, when you've got women that have got rights, and they're different human rights, and they're the kind of rights that men haven't got, or they're certainly browbeaten into forgetting about. They're being manipulated into forgetting about, right? So you've got these women that are now entitled, right? Because they've gotten away with that for generations, and they're brought up to be like that by the women who've gotten away with that. And they were brought up by women who got away with that. And, you know, it comes down the generations. So you've got these entitled women. Hi, Natalie. I end this at 10, Natalie. I don't have an open panel on a Thursday. So you've got these entitled women that I think movements like the girl power of the Spice Girls, can't stand them, could never stand that girl power thing, right? Because I could just see how oppressive that is to men, right? Now, that doesn't just empower one or two women who may have been abused, right? Vast majority of women are not abused. Vast majority of men are not abusers. We need to remember this, okay? There's been some tragic stories in history. Human history is terrible, yeah? The vast majority of men don't abuse women. The vast majority of women are not abused by men, okay? So for the sake of, obviously I'm saying this loosely, a handful of women, if you like, right? This girl power movement has emboldened the already emboldened, okay? So they've gone OTT. When you've got too much of something, it's debaucherous, right? It goes into the negative as opposed to being the flourishing positive. It goes into the negative. And this is where we've got the sense of entitlement that I think this Lionel Shriver is talking about. So yeah, I've just rambled again. Let's go back to it.
Nothing's going to happen to me because I have right on my side. I don't sense that these people are experimenting with civil disobedience in the spirit of the old civil rights days. If nothing else,
they think they do.
They think that this is the tradition, but what happened with the protesters in the civil rights movement is that they willingly, passively gave over to being arrested. All right? They sat in the wrong part of the bus and expected to be arrested. They didn't hurt anybody. They didn't break any other laws aside from the ones that they were protesting. And they willingly accepted the consequences would be, having to give themselves up to the law, and that was the format. This is different.
So you think that they don't now, even after these two famous cases of Good being killed, I'd say it's her fault from what my analysis of it, and likewise Pretty, again, he shouldn't have been antagonizing ICE like that. But
yeah, and I think we should both. Not a bad time to clarify. While I think that they were both foolhardy, they did not deserve to be shot.
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. It doesn't go without saying, I think.
Yes, it was horrible to look at, and it does. There's something not right about it. Nevertheless, it is the case that had they not been antagonizing ICE like they were, it would never have happened. They put themselves in a stupid situation.
And also, the emotions that I'm talking about, and this is, as much as anything, that's my business.
Right. So this
they are hugely hostile, and spitting on these officers, calling them Nazis. They are enjoying themselves in that anger, and I feel quite strongly that they have cast themselves in this particular scenario as the center of the story, as the main actors, and the immigrants themselves are almost irrelevant. It's just an excuse. They're off to the side. This is ostensibly your purpose, but what they are enjoying is the direct conflict with authority, and going out on someone else's behalf. But it's more that they are the saviors. They are the righteous ones. This is one big, what's it called? White savior narrative. That's exactly what it is. It's what they claim is a terrible thing to do. It's what if I wrote a different kind of novel.
They think white savior narrative is bad.
It's terrible.
But they are actually acting it.
That's actually what they're doing. Yes.
And white savior being bad, meaning, because it's...
in fiction, for at least the last 10 years, that's one of the things that that progressive literary people have seized upon. That's if you have a white savior narrative, then you're casting the privileged white person as the hero who's rescuing the poor minorities, and that will not do. The white people don't get to perform that role. They have to be incidental, or you just have to write about little white people stories.
Right.
Don't include anyone else. That's another.
So they've sort of created a trap for themselves where they've said you can't do the white savior stuff, but then when it comes to this issue,
oh yes,
silence is also violence. So they have to do something. But best thing I think is just to avoid the contradiction, and well, not the best thing. They think the best thing, and that's the position they've got themselves into. Well, you say righteous anger.
Mm-hmm.
It's self-righteous anger, not righteous anger, right?
Well, to the people who are feeling it, it feels like righteous anger. To us, looking at them, it looks like self-righteous anger.
Yes. So that part of that emotion of theirs has been hijacked to this issue. And what would you think would be a healthier way for them, let's say in good faith, let's say they care about this issue and they want to do something about it. What would be a reasonable thing for them to do?
I don't know, write an op-ed.
How much do you think this comes down? What you've been describing is sort of narcissism, basically, writ large.
Yes.
How profound?
Well observed.
How deep is this? I think of Jonathan Haidt and in The Righteous Mind. He talks about moral foundations theory, and they sort of split between progressives and conservatives. And progressives tend, or liberals, I think he used that word rather, tend to over-index and sort of harm protection, and conservatives more on loyalty, group-based. I'm just trying to get to the where's the deepest we can go to find the sort of the emotional dividing line here. And I don't know if maybe we've gone as deep as we can, but I wonder if you had any insight there.
Well, definitely on the left on this issue, the position is that they're the caring people. They also embrace this notion of racial shame. And on the other side are the bigots, who are selfish, and also, well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but who are economically ignorant, because we need immigrants.
Right.
And somehow I think the right on this issue is cast as the people of the past, right? The who are increasingly old and irrelevant, because the future is young and foreign.
Which I must press pause and say indicates certainly to me supremacy. Okay, they are very, very arrogant and coming at everything from a place of conceit, to be looking back or anywhere other than themselves and looking at them as lesser or of the past, as how Lionel Shriver described it there.
There's no sense. I mean, this part I think is genuine. That on the left, they don't really believe in their countries.
Yeah.
They don't derive any sense of meaning from their nationality, except in the negative. And a lot of the progressive world is negative. It's all against. But in a positive sense, there is nothing. The only positive is in the joy of organizing this self-hatred, this fake self-hatred. There is no. There's a hole where the pride should be, and I don't think that can be a basis for a successful culture, and I don't think it's really at the basis psychologically for a successful self. These people are often miserable, and in fact, the left tends to poll as, especially on the female side, as much more unhappy than the rest of the country. And I really think it has to do with this sense of void at the center of the ideology. We talk about how the woke thing has become a religion, but it definitely doesn't provide a kind of spiritual sustenance that traditional religion did. There's something missing at the center of this ideology that just eats people up.
Yeah. I definitely want to come back to the male-female divide there. But this whole is interesting because the inverse, maybe, if you looked at like Nazi Germany, it would be that nationalism has filled the hole of God, and that the nation state and a pure nation state was the motivation behind everything. And what you're describing here is this sort of anti-nation state has filled.
Yes.
So it's like it's a black hole inversion of, it's not quite Nazism, but it's sort of, it is, I mean, I do think this comes back to the Second World War, and we've explored this a lot on the show, and Karl Popper. And
yeah, I've seen any number of those episodes, actually.
So if you think I'm wrong, do challenge me on that. But it seems to me that's where the anti-nation state seems to occur. It's curious.
Yes, and that's why we started idolizing these international organizations.
Yes.
So I am much in concurrence with your reading of that.
I find it strange that happened in America, because it was American nationalism that defeated Nazism, or it was the American nation state, obviously with its allies in Britain and Russia and around the world. But I can understand why the Germans would have had that reaction, understandable, but it doesn't make sense why the American spirit would have taken a knock. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I mean, this is bigger than we're going to get into, but obviously it has to do with the growth of the progressive movement that really got going in my younger days. Seems to have come to its insane peak in the last 10 years, but it's been going on my whole life. And, I was a part of it to begin with.
You were part of the problem?
Oh, yes, I was a part of the problem.
How so?
Oh, no, when I was a teenager, yeah, I wore beads and I went to anti-Vietnam protests. Actually, that was the one point in which I think I was probably sound. It was a crummy war,
yeah.
And it was a waste of American resources, and let's face it, we lost. So, yeah, and my older brother was in line for the draft, so I felt that I had a dog in this fight. Although I don't think that metaphor is very kind to him. But I grew up on the left. My parents were liberal Democrats.
So when was your Damascene moment? When did you turn?
I don't think it was a single moment, but I didn't really start questioning my political upbringing until I was in my early 30s. I moved to Northern Ireland, and that really made a conservative out of me.
Did it really?
Yeah.
What about Northern Ireland made you into a conservative?
I hated the IRA, virtually on sight. And by the way, I arrived there with no opinions about the place whatsoever. I was completely ignorant. But I was actually a blank slate. There is such a thing. And I just found the IRA, the people in it, their rhetoric, and not to mention what they were doing, completely repulsive and unjustifiable. What the terrible injustice that they were fighting was comparatively trivial, considering what they were willing to do to press their cause. And in the main, the discrimination against Catholics by the time I arrived in 1987 had been, if anything, overcompensated for, and yet they weren't giving it up.
So why did that make you a conservative rather than, let's say, unionist?
Partly because Democrats in the U.S. were often very pro-IRA. It was considered a liberation movement, and so I thought, well, that's just morally off.
Right.
I have the same response to the Democratic response to October 7th. It's morally off. Sorry, this does not compute. Why are you backing this? Why can't you see that this is disgusting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
that helped a separation. And I also on a completely different issue, fell out with my father on Clinton's welfare reforms, because my father was indignant over Clinton's welfare reforms. Clinton was trying to really cut the welfare rolls and get people back to work, and I thought that was great. And my father threatened to never give another dime to the Democratic Party again. And I thought, this doesn't make sense. This is ultimately condescending.
Hang on a minute. She remembers when Clinton was a president and he was trying to cut out some welfare to get people back to work. Yet today, the Democrats and, Clinton himself and herself will condemn Trump when he's trying to do the same. It's hypocritical. That's what I'm seeing, the common theme here. Hypocrites amongst liberals. Today's liberals, anyway. But yeah, we'll continue. We've got another 13 or so minutes left.
Sending, because my father was a workaholic, and he took great pride in his professional achievements. Why would you wish worklessness for other people?
And why do you think he did? What was his thinking? How did he got to that place?
Well, it's the politics of pity. I don't think I don't think that's I did not think that was well thought through. And if he really felt compassion for people on the welfare rolls, he'd want them off the welfare rolls. That is not a dignified existence. It is not a rich existence. It's emotionally impoverished, as well as keeping you at a certain level of financial poverty.
So you want to create incentives to go the other way.
Yeah.
Can I ask about the male-female divide on this? It's not apparent or self-evident to me that women would be progressive on the issue of immigration. In fact, the opposite. Because if a woman evolutionary has evolved to protect an infant, and we see, certainly in Britain, that it is young children, young girls that are being systematically raped, abused. You'd think that mothers, and now there are movements, by the way, there's the pink mothers in Epping, but you'd think that mothers would be more conservative and women would be more conservative in having a strong border, protecting the vulnerable in their society. And yet it looks like polling shows women are increasingly, certainly young women, harder and harder left. In fact, people have been claiming it's young men who are going further and further right. But over the last few years, there's some reports, the FT did a report on this, that it's actually the women who, not just in the West, but in South Korea and other parts of the world, the women who are going much further left. What's your take and understanding of that sort of, to me, that inconsistency?
I do think that in terms of maternal instinct, it's inverted, because you would think that you would care most about the usual, care about your immediate family, then your larger family, your town and region, out to your own country, and then out to all of humanity, maybe. But that all humanity thing is less intense. The intense sense of protection starts close to home, and this is instead starts out there. That's where all the intense feelings are. Now, I come back again to my analysis of this emotionally. Ultimately, the people out there are completely irrelevant. It's all about self. Right? That's where the passion comes from. The self, and also intra-group rivalry. Competition between women, for example, over who's more righteous, who cares more, who's the purest and goodest person, right? And it doesn't. It's, look at the Palestinian thing. What do these people have to do with the Palestinians? Nothing. They know nothing about Palestinians. Right? They don't know anything about the Israeli conflict. It's just an excuse. But together, this is one of my only explanations, because ultimately, of course, it is fundamentally baffling. But they seem to feel a sense of group identity when they get together and have all these protests. So it gives them a sense of belonging to each other
and meaningfulness.
Yeah. And these are people who clearly crave a sense of purpose and think they found one.
Do you think it's linked to increased childlessness?
Probably. Isn't having children the ultimate sense of purpose? It calls you to care for these people. You're the only one who's going to, if you're married, your husband, you're the only people who are going to take care of these people. They need you to survive. And that calls you to a primitive kind of loyalty that a lot of the women we're talking about do not enjoy. And, you know, I have found a sense of purpose in my work. But everyone doesn't have that.
And I think that's the point that I was trying to make when I was saying that, when I was talking with Ravioli when he was here before the break, that I think women have set themselves up for this because they don't actually have enough challenge in their life. So they don't have that sense of purpose. They've got what they wanted and now they're stuck because there's this void in their life. They've got all of this entitlement. They've got this power over the man via the courts, especially the family courts, where what's said in family court must stay in family court. It's terribly abusive because typically the family courts are swayed, regardless of the facts, in favour of the woman, the mother, the female, and against certainly the white man in the developed world, no matter how right he might be and how innocent he might be and how he might be the best of the two parents for the children to be placed with. The courts will typically act against him. And these women, they have this temporary gratification, and you know, they're over the moon, they're emboldened, it's all girl power, and go out with their girlfriends and celebrate. Yeah, didn't let him win, did I? But then what have they got? They've got this void. So they've chosen to win instead of being happy, because they're not happy, they're not content, so they're looking for something else to fill that void. They haven't got that purpose to have. You know, you've got to strive when it comes to having a purpose. You've got to put yourself into it. They've got nothing to put themselves into. So let's hear a few more minutes of her and then we'll end stream. If I have something else to ramble on, I might have lost my thread there.
And I think there is a gratification in being that person who takes a genuinely they're always talking about the vulnerable, but there's nothing more vulnerable than a child.
Exactly.
And protects that child, feeds that child, nourishes and teaches that child, it turns and helps turn that person into a functional adult, ideally. I mean, that's a sense of purpose.
Yeah.
And if you have just a kind of regular job, you know, that you don't care very much about, I don't think that substitutes. So yeah, I think widespread childlessness is not unrelated.
Smooth moderator.